This is Support is Sexy, episode 522, with Amy Smith, founder of The Joy Junkie. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so happy to have you here because it would not be the same without you. And I am so happy about this episode. It is actually all about support. Not only how you support other people, but how are you showing up to support yourself and stand up for yourself? And you know, we're all about that around here. All about support. And if you are a woman entrepreneur who feels like, you know, you're out there, you're building your business or you're about to launch your business, you might be feeling a little bit lonely because let's face it, entrepreneurship, especially if you're an online entrepreneur or a solopreneur, you're just getting started, it can be lonely. But I always say, having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone. You do not have to go through this journey alone. There are women entrepreneurs out there like you who are there to support you. And you can find more than 300 of them in the Support is Sexy Mastermind. So please go check out supportissexymastermind.com. Find out about this global community of women entrepreneurs who are there to support you, as well as other things that we've created to help support you as you build and grow and monetize your business, but also as you take care of yourself and support yourself. supportissexymastermind.com. Now, on this episode, I had the pure pleasure of talking to Amy Smith, who is the founder of The Joy Junkie, also the Joy Junkie podcast. She also is a confidence coach. And Amy is also the author of the book, Stand Up for Yourself Without Being a Blank. So she is a woman who is no holds barred when it comes to standing up for yourself. Yet she speaks to us in this episode about the importance of having grace and standing in integrity and really being amazing to yourself and other people. I really enjoyed the conversation. In fact, you will hear me request and receive some really great coaching in this episode. The importance of standing up for ourselves, why a lot of us as women don't do it. A lot of it has to do with society. Other things have to do with things going on within us. So we talk about that in this episode. Also, how this plays out in your personal relationships and, of course, in your business. So I know you're going to enjoy this. Now, what I do want to warn you, though, there is some adult language. So if you have some little ones around, now might be a good time to put in your earbuds. All right. So now, without further ado, I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Amy Smith. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining us for Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Oh, likewise. We'll have fun.
Excellent. Now, first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Oh my gosh, that was a bit of a journey. I have always been kind of risk adverse and tended to think that I kind of bought into this idea that working for somebody else was really, really stable. And went through a couple of layoffs and realized, well, that wasn't the truth. And for the longest time, I thought, I don't think I fully believed in my own capabilities of being 100% responsible for my own income and to really run the ins and outs of a full-on business. So I think there was an internal piece where I had to kind of break through what I believed was really possible for myself. And the other element of that was realizing that there was very much a ceiling if I worked for somebody else, and that would just be a series of interviews to try to grow in another company up the pipeline. And I kind of went, I love the idea of not only being able to dictate my own income, but to also dictate the values under which I operate all the time. And one of the things that I am so incredibly proud of, and one of the reasons why I fell in love specifically with the modality of coaching, was that I got to be authentic, period. Like I got to be the exact same Amy in my business that I was with my best friends and with my husband. And I didn't have to kind of mold myself into somebody else's vision or somebody else's company. And for me, there was just no turning back after that. Like, oh, I get to call all the shots. Hell yeah. Sign me up.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting how years ago we were all sort of taught to find the quote unquote good job and not fall in line, but do the best you can to rise up in whatever position and stay there however many years that you can. And like you said, layoffs can definitely shatter that dream for you or show you that times are different now.
That's right. That's right.
So tell us your background and where you grew up.
Ooh, okay. Well, this actually has a lot to do with sort of the modality that I ended up falling into and sort of the niche that I cater to now.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, I was born in 79, so I grew up through the 80s in Southern California with a very, very conservative born-again Christian household. So to give you a little bit of context, my father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry. So he was definitely not fucking around. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a very dogmatic, very fear and guilt motivated society where there was a very stringent code of right and wrong. And kind of as I have unpacked a lot of things from my childhood, I've realized that there were quite a few elements that were very cult-like, and have had to kind of grapple with that as I've grown as an adult. But I'm very clear that a lot of the mission that I have now and message that I have now was informed by a stifled voice growing up and sort of always fighting this instinct of, that doesn't seem right. Oh, but I need to just shut up and be quiet. Oh, okay. And, kind of raising my hand like, hey, wait. So you're trying to tell me that, and feeling as though everything that was intuitive for me, following my gut, things like that, were always kind of squashed under fear and guilt and dogma. And so it took many, many, many years until I realized that I could be a really whole, resourceful, beautiful, valuable human without the religion that I was raised under. So, at the time it kind of felt like, why the hell is my family like this? And then now hindsight's 2020 and I can go, oh, that's why, because I needed to learn how to speak up for myself and honor what Amy needed.
Yeah, as you mentioned too, thank you for sharing that with us. As you mentioned too, on your website, at least you talked about struggling during that time to find your own voice. So I'm curious, what was the point or the catalyst, I guess, when you decided to, as you said, be able to speak out and just really, it sounds like just question things, which is normal for most young people. Why is this that way? Is this true? Does this work for me? But was there a catalyst that you can think of that really made you decide, okay, I'm going to be brave and go my own way?
Absolutely. There was a very poignant period of my life. It was about 11 years ago. And I had gotten involved in personal development a few years prior to that, kind of in the early to mid 2000s. And then in 2007, my father passed away. Mm-hmm. And the events surrounding his funeral and his service really changed my entire perspective around the cost of putting everybody else's thoughts, opinions, and needs in front of yours. Not to say that they don't matter, but if we're always in this place of self-sacrifice, we're constantly sending that subconscious message to ourselves that I just simply don't matter as much as my parents' opinion or my spouse's opinion or my kid's opinion or whatever. Like there's this idea that they're more important than I am. So that particular day, the way this kind of came to a head is my background prior to this was working in makeup artistry. So I actually performed the makeup on my father's deceased body for his viewing.
Say that again. You performed.
I know, right?
Make sure I understand. So you were a makeup artist, and then your father passed away, and then when you say you performed the makeup, you applied the makeup, or you did something else?
Exactly. Yes, I applied the makeup to his corpse. Mm-hmm. So it was a grueling day, to say the least. And, I felt very secure in that decision, and I have zero regrets. But I also spoke to a group of hundreds of people about sort of the legacy that my father had left. And he really was a beautiful, incredible human. And it was a very impactful day. You know, I had just done this really intimate makeup application on my father who
I
had
was going to
just
say,
passed
it sounds
away.
like such an intimate thing to be able to do for, of course, people dress their parents and that kind of thing, but to be able to apply the makeup just sounds very intimate, like you said.
It was. And I was incredibly grateful for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But where it all came to a head is afterwards. And just a little bit of context, I was always very much a daddy's girl, aligned so much more with my father than my mother. So I get home to my mom's house and she says, I can't remember what we were talking about, but something was coming up with regards to faith and religion. And she says, well, it just feels like we failed as parents.
Hmm.
And I'm going, okay, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. I am the child who has been working since she was 14, who put herself through college, who moved out and got married when she was 20, who just performed mortuary makeup on her father and spoke to hundreds, you know, and gave a eulogy. And you're telling me that you failed as a parent, like that I'm this disappointment, right? So in that moment, the only thing that I could kind of muster is I said, you probably shouldn't say that to a child, you know, essentially saying, you know, you're a failure in our eyes. And I have two younger brothers who have both done jail time, have had a much more tumultuous youth and upbringing. And she kind of would lump us very much in the same category because of the faith that it almost doesn't matter unless you're walking with the Lord or being in, you know, her realm of belief, right? So she's telling me this, and I kind of realized in that moment, I realized that there are certain situations like that are so polarized, where it's, if I choose my mother's approval, I also choose complete self-sacrifice. If I choose to, let's say, not come out of the closet, I choose self-sacrifice. If I choose to stay in a marriage that I am like dying a slow death and feel, you know, radically out of alignment with this person, and whatever it happens to be, you choose to make them more important, you choose to sacrifice self. And so I realized, okay, there are going to be situations, plenty of situations that are negotiable and that can be collaborative, right? And then there are certain decisions like this that when push comes to shove, if I have to choose between you and me, I choose me. Because I cannot keep choosing everybody else, including family, including the approval of my parents. And I remember having a conversation with another very close friend of mine who grew up in the same organization that I grew up in. And she kind of said, how did you get to this place? How did you get to this place of peace? And I said, I had to be okay with being a disappointment to my parents, being specifically to my mom. And if she was going to carry the burden of my soul, that I was going to allow that to be hers, that I was not going to take that on, and I was not going to twist, and I was not going to contort and try to become somebody that I absolutely was not. Nor was I going to chastise her for being her. I wasn't going to ask her to be different.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes we get convoluted in that, where we don't do that person the same service.
Right. I think it's so, like I said before, thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I think it's really going to resonate with people. It definitely is with me, especially the idea of getting over our own need to make sure that others aren't disappointed. Sometimes, at least for me, that seems more difficult than my own disappointment to deal with. I know sometimes I don't share things that maybe, even good things that might be on the cusp of happening, because I worry, well, if that doesn't go through, I don't want that other person to be disappointed. And that is another way of putting that another person first, right? Not even considering my own feelings. Now, there are some times, of course, you want to be considerate of other people. We're not saying that, and I know everyone gets that. But just your story and that lesson in that, this idea, there have to be times when you take care of yourself and just say, you know what? If this person decides to be disappointed in my choices for myself, it's just going to have to be that way.
That's so incredibly true. And I'm glad that you drew that distinction, because there was a very interesting chronology that happened directly following that decision, when I kind of realized, okay, there are going to be times when it is an ultimatum, and it is, I decided your approval or Amy's approval.
Mm-hmm.
And right after that, I went through a very adversarial, combative place where it was almost like I got all these guts up, and then I was just really biting and mean and kind of wanted to pick fights. And that was still me kind of coming into my own and realizing that I could create my own definition of spirituality. And then it evolved into a place where I realized that I can do all of this. I can speak my truth. I can deliver really uncomfortable conversations, and I can do it all from a place of grace and kindness. That it doesn't mean that I'm going to behave in an adversarial way, right? Like you could ask your adult children to move out of the house, or you could ask for a separation from a spouse, and you can do all of that with the most incredible love and compassion and kindness. It does not have to mean that you have to behave in a way unbefitting of you. And that is one of the biggest pieces I find in this work of giving voice to things, is people believing that the only way to really speak up is to be a bitch, right? Like we hear all of that in women's roles and how to get ahead. You have to be masculine and you can't be emotional. And so we have this idea of, okay, well, if you speak up, then you're kind of a dick. And I don't want to be a dick, right? So a lot of it has to do with how you speak up for yourself and your cadence and your delivery.
Do you think also that it is, or I should say, what would your advice be for people who are on, say, for example, your friends, et cetera, who understand you? So maybe they weren't in the same, coming from the same place as your mom, but your friends who are used to you being one way, now you've decided to change. And as you said, you're going through a little bit of a period where you're finding your way. For people who are in the place right now, who are listening, who are the friend. So they have a friend who's changing, who's going through something, obviously. Maybe they are, as you said, going through a space where they're being harsh or just something's different. How does that friend still be there to support that person? What do you advise is the best way to support that person? Give them their space, ask them if you can support. Because I find sometimes we end up, if as the friend, as the outside person, you don't understand it, and what you don't understand you think is weird, or you think, like you say, you think they're being a dick, or you just sort of come up with your own assessment of what this person is going through. Is there some advice for how we can be there to support those we love who might be going through a transition?
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes down to untangling any information that you don't have. So for instance, if somebody is, maybe they're a little shorter with you than they have been in the past, or you hear that they're kind of going on and on about something that you're curious about. I would say one of the things that I do, and it's something that's really helpful specifically to me in our political environment at this time, no matter what it's related to, women or ethnicity or whatever, if I have an immediate gut response about somebody, like that's wrong, or that behavior is shitty, or whatever, that is in me, or if I eye roll even, I stop myself and I go, wait a minute, what are you not seeing because you're judging? What are you not seeing because you're standing in judgment and you're just deciding they're an asshole, they're becoming too selfish, they're, whatever we kind of brand somebody as. And so I know that my quick judgment like that is a clue into me to stop and go, wait a minute, what am I maybe not asking? Or what am I not understanding about that other person? Because one of the things that we do know very crystal clearly is that people do not make change unless they feel understood. So, if you're trying to get your spouse to do something and you're just kind of yelling at them and bitching about it, if they don't feel understood about why they're behaving that way in the first place, it's likely that they're never going to change. So the same is true for any other type of relationship. If we don't understand what's going on with them, it's not likely that they're going to be open to your feedback or they want to hear your feedback. One of the other things that you were kind of pointing to that I think is incredibly overlooked and so incredibly simple is to simply ask people how you can be amazing for them.
Yes. I always say one of the most loving words is, tell me what you need.
Yes.
Just tell me what can I do? Anything? If not, I'll just give you your space.
Exactly. But We don't do that though. We go, oh, you know what you need? You need to do this. Or,
Right.
oh, you need to listen to my coach over here. You just need to get back in the gym again. Oh, and instead of going like, hey, honey, like what's happening? How can I be amazing for you? How can I support you? And if you don't know yet, that's okay too. Because a lot of
That
times,
is beautiful. How can I be amazing for you?
yeah,
I love that.
I do it with my husband all the time, all the time. And sometimes what happens is they'll learn faster what they don't need. And that needs to be okay for them to give voice to that too. So for instance, if you're asking every single day, they might go, okay, what I do need is for you to let me come to you.
Right.
What I don't need is to be asked every damn day. Okay, cool. And then you have to be receptive to that feedback. You have to collaborate.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing both sides of that. I feel like we don't, I shouldn't say I feel like we don't. I don't necessarily hear both sides that often. So, but because you have so much experience with both sides, I think it was good to ask you that I love that. How can I be amazing for you? I'm going to take that, Amy. I'm going to use that.
Well, good.
That's
great.
good. I obviously support is my thing, but I don't know. I just think there's so much power in that because as a person, if I were on the receiving end of that, I think my response would just be, you know, it would be amazing. And then I can fill in the blank. You know, you think about what would really be amazing right now. That goes beyond just what I could use support with. What would be amazing for me right now?
Well, and something else I kind of add as an addendum oftentimes, because I work so much in communication, boundaries, saying no, speaking up, is I will say, is there anything in particular that's really unhelpful for me to say or really helpful? If there's any one little thing. So I'll give you an example. With my husband and I struggled with anxiety. I have my entire life. And it was incredibly debilitating in my early 20s. And there would be days when I could mentally overcome and overpower and really use every amount of bandwidth to think positively, right? Against how I was kind of chemically wired to worry. And so I would come home and my husband would be like, how was your day? And I'd be like, man, it was a really tough one today. I just was really worried, constantly overthinking. And he would say, babe, you can do this. I know you can overpower it. I know you can think more positively. And so I had to tell him like, and I didn't though. So knowing that I could have had a much better day and I fucked it up, like is not helpful. So here's what I need you to say. I need you to say, babe, I am so sorry. You're going to get it tomorrow. And he was like, great. Thank you for telling me the exact thing. And then he started, a piece of him there's a piece of me delivering that kindly, first of all. Like, hey, babe, here's what would be so helpful. That's huge, not being biting about it.
Yeah, not like, I don't want to hear that. Yeah, that goes a whole different direction. Right.
The next piece is him actually being receptive and going like, thank God. Okay, perfect. Thank you for telling me exactly what you need. And then for us to actually implement that, right? And I've done this with my best friend where I thought I was being super motivating to her. And she was like, can you please just not say anything about being strong? Because that makes me feel like I can't break down or I can't. And I'm like, okay, cool. Good to know. Aptly noted. I won't say that again. But we don't do that. We just go, I know what's encouraging. I know how to motivate them. And a lot of times it's not what they want to hear. It's not helpful.
Right. This is what, especially, that's such good advice too, especially, I mean, a lot of the women listening and myself included, I'm going through my own development and evolving and learning more about personal development. So I'm really in this space. Everybody's not there. So everybody doesn't want to hear that at the same time that you're hearing it, and sometimes we think, well, I'm learning all this and I know, Amy's teachings and I can tell you how to do this and that. And Amy says, and people are just like, I can't even hear it. I can't receive it right now. So for everyone listening to be aware, it's really about awareness, right? Aware of where you are. And then as we've said here, be sure to ask the other person what would be amazing for them. Our new phrasing that I absolutely love.
Yeah. I mean, and you think about it, okay, like whenever you get involved in personal growth or personal development, and you might find you're very much in this place where you're like, oh shit, I can actually speak really nicely to myself, or I can contend with fear in a different way, or oh my gosh, I tried this new thing and it's working so well when I'm working with clients or on the stage or whatever. You become like an evangelist for the latest lash growing serum, or it's almost like you joined an MLM, right? And you want to tell everyone, I have this amazing opportunity for you. And they're like, I don't care about your protein powder. Back off, right?
Right.
That's a lot of how it is when you first get involved in personal development and you see some actual market changes in your life we want to share. But to your point, not everybody's ready to receive. So you can, and in fact, I did a whole podcast episode about this where it's about offering and inviting and then backing off if they're like, no, thanks. You know, if you say, hey, I had a similar issue like that. I was really struggling with speaking up to my in-laws about, you know, not feeding my kid a bunch of sugary cereals or something like that. Right. And I was listening to this podcast and it was really helpful for me. Let me know if you want me to pass it on. If not, no big deal. But it's kind of a, here's something that helped me. I'm happy to offer it to you. If you don't want it, no big deal, right? It's their responsibility. So that's very different than the diagnosis. Here's what you need to do.
Exactly. That's right. Now, what podcast episode was this? This was on the Joy Junkie, right?
Yes. I will need to get you the exact number, but I believe it's around when somebody else in your life is always chronically the victim. And you don't know how to say like, hey, you can kind of help yourself.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll get that for you.
Okay. So everyone listening, we'll make sure we have the link for that, how to offer help. That's great. So tell me now, as a confidence coach, how do you help clients really stand up for themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's two massive components to what I do. The first is the internal piece, right? Like we would like for this to not be the case. We don't want to have to deal with our belief in ourselves or our own self-talk. What we want to do is figure out how to make our mother-in-law stop being so overbearing, or how to talk to our husband about doing something different in the bedroom. Or, you know, we have these things that we think everything will be perfect as soon as my husband gets his head out of his ass, or as soon as my in-laws leave me alone, or whatever. Instead of going, okay, there's two major pieces here. There's my relationship to myself, which is really truly about believing that you speaking up is valuable. It has a lot to do with just intrinsic self-worth, believing that my voice matters enough to be vocal about it, right? And it can be in tons of different ways. But that's the first piece, is believing that like, yeah, my voice matters. Like I can tell somebody outside of the supermarket, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't sign that petition. I just don't believe in that cause, but much luck to you, right? But we don't. We go, I gotta go. We make up some lie. So it's that belief that what I have to say actually matters. So the internal component. And then the second piece is the actual communication. Like, what does that sound like to decline an invite? And everything in you wants to lie about having other plans, but really, you just would rather be binging out on a Netflix show. You don't want to go to that event. How do you actually say that and not lie and actually be in integrity? So it's the internal piece of believing that I'm valuable, and then the external piece of communication with the outside world.
Why is it so difficult for some of us to stand up for ourselves? And I did a funny, you mentioned podcast episodes. I did an episode actually about that and I asked this for the simplest things. With me, it was, I'll give a short version of it. I went to get my lashes done. I decided to get lashes one day. The woman who was doing my lashes was lovely. There was another woman in there though, Amy, who would not stop talking. It was in a small room. They had a room that you go into, and she just kept talking in another language, in their language from where they're from. So it wasn't even like I could join the conversation. And I just wanted to lay there and be quiet as she did. But something in me wouldn't allow me to say, you know what? I just really would love it if it was quiet, right? And I'm sure they wouldn't have minded. It just was a weird thing the whole time. So for an hour or so, I'm sitting there trembling basically from anger, because I felt like this woman should know. I felt like she should just know that a customer would want quiet in the room and she should go out if she didn't have. Anyway, it was quite silly, but for me, as I said, shared on the podcast, I was like, I have to check in. Like, why didn't I stand up for myself in that simple moment? What does this say about me? So what do you think? What do you find, at least with the clients that you work with, is usually the biggest roadblock to standing up for ourselves?
Oh my goodness. There's so much here. In a nutshell, it distills down to fear, right? It is what we make up about if we speak up for ourselves, right? So if I were coaching you, I would say, What did you make up speaking up for yourself in that scenario would mean about you or would do, right? Like, what was the fear about?
I felt like I would hurt her feelings.
Exactly.
That's what I was more worried about, as you talked about earlier, right? Putting other people's feelings before ourselves.
Exactly. A lot of times this comes down to two major fallacies that I see, and it's very pervasive for women. And it's a lot of just social conditioning, unfortunately, that I feel so strongly about dismantling, because I don't think a lot of men have these sorts of things. Like, and sometimes, yes, and I'm sure it's suppressed in many ways, but they don't think, okay, if I speak up for myself, I must be an asshole. Sometimes, granted, yes, sometimes, but a majority of the time, there's not any sort of like, oh, well, you're being a dick if you actually speak up, right? So I see that people take so much responsibility for how the other person feels instead of focusing on how they are behaving. So for instance, if you were to say, you know what, if in order for me to give voice to this and feel proud of the woman that I am, I would need to present this information to them, deliver this information in a really compassionate, soft, kind way. So it might sound something like, excuse me, guys, I am so incredibly not trying to rock the boat, but I'll be honest, I would really love just a really calm, tranquil session. Is there any possibility that we could just have a little bit more quiet in the room and maybe wait on some conversation? What are your thoughts? You know, and kind of make it kind instead of what we think needs to happen, which is being so assertive that is like, can you guys just shut up, please? You know?
Right, exactly. Even though you might feel that way, but that totally wasn't how I felt. I just thought, why isn't she just, well, she wasn't even doing anything like assisting. It would be different if they both needed to be there. She was literally in there just to chat with this other woman. So you're so right. I could have easily done it with grace.
That's it. And that's the thing that we oftentimes don't realize. So again, to talk about kind of those two fallacies that we buy into pervasively as women is this idea that if I speak up, I'm being bitchy. Like I have to be mean in some way. And then the second piece is that I'm purposely inflicting pain on somebody, right? Like that's the whole idea with something as grand as coming out of the closet, right? Like I'm purposely hurting my family. No, you're not, honey. You're standing in self-love and integrity, and you can deliver that information in the most graceful, loving manner. So untangling what our responsibility is, I think, is huge. So something that I advise to people, and this might be really helpful for you in similar situations going forward, is this idea of what you're responsible for. You are responsible for your intention, not your reception.
Oh, say that again, Amy. You are responsible for your intention,
not your reception.
Okay, what does that mean?
So here's what I mean by that. So let's say you decide, in order for Elayne to feel amazing about herself, here's how I would need to deliver this to this technician, right? I would say it like this. I would say, hey guys, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I was really looking forward to blah, 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 blah. Scenario I just gave an example of. Now, if you look at that and you go, you know what, Elayne, you handled that well. I'm super proud of you. Like you were kind, you were assertive. That's your own barometer of success. That's your own homeostasis. Like here's how Elayne needs to feel amazing. Now the reception, how she responds could be all over the place, right? She could go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Of course, let me create a really nice tranquil space for you. She could give you a totally dirty look and walk off. She could be completely indifferent and not care really one way or another. The point is the reception is all across the board. Yet we try to control how people respond to us. We try to control what our in-laws think of us. We try to control what that new boss thinks of us by twisting and contorting and not really being authentic, right? We become kind of like we're wearing masks all the time, which is, I find, hilarious because when we talk about who we want to attract in our life, whether it's best friends, colleagues, or romantic suitors, we want authenticity. We want honesty. We want people who call us on our shit, right?
Right, exactly.
So be the person you want to attract.
That's right.
So I had a situation like this at the time of the election. I had done a podcast that was politically leaning. And it was truly this whole message that I'm sharing with you, that we can have all these various differences of opinions and still talk about it in a graceful, kind manner with one another, right? So that was the whole message, was we can really watch how we present ourselves. Well, I did this podcast episode, and again, was really grounded in my attention. Here's who I am. I'm really wanting people to converse with one another from a really loving place, no matter what they feel. And the reception was all across the board, right? I had some people who were like, thank God, I had no idea how I was going to deal with Thanksgiving with my family. I so appreciate this podcast. Then I had other people who didn't even listen to it and said, like, I can't, just from the title, they kind of said, I can't believe you would do this. You lost a listener. And I was going, oh my gosh, well, be well on your way, because clearly
be well.
Be well, my friend, right? Like, I still need to stand in what I'm telling you right now. I don't say, fuck you, get out of here. I'm still like, be well, do your thing, right? And then there were still others who were totally indifferent. Like, I'm not even looking at political stuff, like, out. But if I tried to make all those people happy, not only am I miserable, but that's impossible. I can't make all those people happy. The only emotional current I can control is me. So when I stop and I look at, okay, am I proud of my behavior? Is there anything I would have done differently on that podcast? Have I presented myself with grace and kindness, which is always a cornerstone for me? Was I articulate? Was I brave? Was I kind? All these things. Yes. So everybody else, be well, right? And I think one of the biggest problems here is that we experience something uncomfortable, and so we just don't want to go there, right? If we go, I actually find that really offensive, I'm going to politely excuse myself. We anticipate that that's going to be uncomfortable, so we are like, fuck it, abort mission. I'm just not going to even go there. We don't want to experience that discomfort or pain. That's very, very human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean it's the best choice for you. Right? Like, working out hurts, right? Like, there's pain involved in that. And we know, no pain, no gain, right? Like, you have to become physically uncomfortable in order to cultivate a strong body. The exact same thing is true for emotional resilience. We have to build up our ability to sit with uncomfortable emotions in order to go, okay, no, yeah, I feel fear, but I'm going to operate from courage. Right? So one of the ways in which I do this, and this might be helpful for you, and I don't know as if it was completely applicable to this scenario, but one of the things I gauge for do I need to speak up or not is, does my silence make me a liar? Will my silence make me a liar? If I don't speak up here, am I feigning that I'm complicit or that I agree with that person?
Right. And that makes me think right away. I thought about the political climate right now, whatever side you're on. But yes, I know what side I'm on. And I just think about that a lot of does my silence make me complicit, or seem like I support this, or, yep.
And I think there's varying degrees of this. For me, This is if I'm in a text thread, or if I'm involved in a conversation, or, primarily in person, or, dealing with strangers at the bank or whatever.
Work environments or clients, for everyone listening. It's all we're always faced with situations like this, right?
Exactly. And so for me, I had a situation, I do community theater sometimes in my spare time. And I was around a cast member who had a meme that he thought was hilarious, that he wanted to share with me, that was actually incredibly disparaging to mentally and physically disabled children. And I found it incredibly offensive. And so I had this moment, right, where he's colluding with me, like, hi, Amy, check out how funny this is. And I'm kind of like appalled. So the easy thing to avoid any sort of uncomfortable feeling would to be like, haha, and walk away. But that is not of integrity. And also I do this as a profession. So I'm kind of like, you can't walk around all over the internet saying this is what you do and then not live it. Mm-hmm. So I also know that I don't have to get into a big old conversation. All I need to do is stand in integrity. So I said, hey, listen, I get that you find that funny. I actually find it really offensive. Please just don't show me that stuff in the future. And then I walked away. So it's not like every single time you give voice to something, you have to have a full-blown conversation about why you believe that, or no, not at all. Sometimes it's just that assertiveness of saying like, I'm going to need to disagree with you, and I can't continue to engage in this conversation, I'm going to politely excuse myself. That's what I'm talking about. Like where you go, I matter too. My voice matters too. My comfort level matters too. How you're presenting yourself, you are responsible for. Therefore, if you're going to present yourself that way, I'm going to politely excuse myself because I'm not going to be around this. So that's something that I use sort of as an integrity gauge of, do I need to say something here? Another piece of it is shit you complain about all the time. If you're willing to tell your mom or your spouse or your bestie how shitty your business partner is, but you won't tell them, then you have a problem there as well. That's on you, right? There's something you need to give voice to.
I think integrity, it's a word that you've used a few times, and it's so important as a thread throughout all of this. Integrity, being in integrity with yourself, with how you show up and who you be in the world, with situations where you're not speaking up in a situation where, like you mentioned, the gentleman showing you something that was clearly to us, offensive, seeming offensive to us. Wasn't clear to him, obviously, but just integrity in all of those situations. And I think, just to go back to, it definitely is helpful for me, and I'm going to make sure I do this, and I'm sure it's resonating with women listening. Are you proud of your behavior or the way that you presented whatever that moment was where you stood up for yourself? What, like me, with the lashes or anything else, and your work environment with your business partner, etc., and focusing on you're responsible for your intention, not the reception.
That's right.
I think that's really, because we do, as you said, it really hit me of, yes, it's because I'm thinking so far ahead, trying to control the outcome, how this person feels, what they think about me after I say this. All of those things are outside of my control. But if I focused on saying it with kindness and grace, and then being proud of how I did it, that's all you can do, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And so there's two things that I would advocate for a situation like yours. So if people are listening and they're kind of going, okay, great. Yeah, now I'm beating myself up because I didn't tell my hairstylist what I really thought. Or I didn't say,
like you said, tomorrow. You do it better tomorrow.
Right. Or I faked an orgasm. That's another one. Like, that's a massive liar right there. So what you can do is what I call declaring the do-over. And you walk through the do-over in your head and you go, okay, Elayne, if you were presented with that situation again, how verbatim, what would you say? And you act it out. So you have a reservoir of like, here's the info that will come out. The other thing that you can do, depending on what you need to give voice to. So let's say it's that situation of maybe you need to sever a business alliance, right? Or a joint venture or something like that. And you need to do that. So in one column, you're going to put together 3 columns on a piece of paper. The first column, you write what you want to say, what you need to give voice to, right? In the second column, you anticipate the wealth of responses that you could potentially get from that person. They might be super supportive. They might be indifferent. They might be pissed. Write down all the things that they might say. And then in the third column, how you would then want to respond to them, right? So for instance, if they get really combative, how do you want to stay calm? How do you want to acknowledge their emotions and how they're feeling? How do you want to handle yourself? Because I'm guessing coming at them like a bat out of hell is probably not what you want to do, right? So if you can get ahead of the conversation, I call it gearing up, like to get really, really clear on here's how I want to handle myself. Here's what I really want to be clear about. Here's what I'm requesting from this person. And then here's all the wealth of ways that they could respond to me and then how I would want to follow suit. So sometimes just getting your head around that instead of feeling like it's taking you along for the ride can be really helpful because at our core, we're still very fight or flight. So if somebody comes at us really biting, we usually run away or we become combative. But if you can forecast it a little bit, you can keep your cool a little bit better, and you can kind of handle yourself again in a way in which you're proud.
I think too, that could work for everyone listening. If you have to quote unquote break up with or part ways with, let's say, with a client, even that is because sometimes if it's a business partner or someone like that, there may already be like you both may be feeling it's time to part. Maybe not. But I just feel like, you might be already in that space and it won't be as much of, say, a surprise if you have the conversation, even though I think the exercise is still a great one for any quote unquote difficult conversation. But say it's a client who might not be expecting you to say, hey, I really think this isn't working out, or however you would phrase that. Doing that exercise could be helpful even there too. How can you be in integrity with yourself and your business and what you're offering and how you want to serve people and how you want people to speak to you, and then going through how they might respond and what your response could be.
Exactly. And then that way you are far more rooted in how you want to show up. Because if you know, like, okay, gosh, the minute they get combative or upset is usually when I want to blame, right? Like we do this all the time in marriages, or we just, oh, well, it's your fault then, and we just want to get all upset and mad. And so you might have to really look at, okay, if this client goes into a real victim place or wants to get mad at me, like, how do I want to conduct myself if that's the case? Right? So yeah, it can be incredibly helpful.
Now, in your book, Stand Up for Yourself Without Being a Dick, which is the conversation we've been having this whole time, which is great. You share 9 proven strategies to improve your self-confidence and self-love. So I'm interested in finding out, you share so many great tips and advice with us. What would you say, though, is one thing that you want the women listening to hear today about that, if there were just one lesson to walk away with from that?
Oh, I would say to be incredibly compassionate for yourself as you practice this, because everything in our world and in our society is stacked against this. So even primitively, right? Like one of our biological human needs is the sense of belonging, is to belong. So, whereas primitive man relied on that for literal survival, now we go, oh, I must be liked by these people in order to be valuable. We know we're not going to actually die, consciously, but our subconscious mind, our lizard brain, still thinks we might die if we don't get approved by all these people or loved by the masses or, an intimate partner or whatever. So I really think that there's this piece of being really gentle with yourself as you develop this, right? Like how many times have we heard, don't rock the boat, don't open up a can of worms, children need to be seen, not heard, don't say anything nice, if you can't say anything, right? We have all these ways to say, shut the fuck up and keep your shit inside, instead of saying, hey, you deserve to have a voice, right? So I just want to throw that out there, that from our family of origin to media, to society, to everything, this is not nurtured. So look at it as though it's a brand new skill set. Like if you're just now learning how to ride the bike, or you're just now learning a new language, it's going to take time to master it. So let's just start with one small thing. And what I would say is to make a commitment right now to simply not lie the next time somebody asks something of you, asks your opinion. You don't necessarily have to get involved in a whole conversation. You don't have to be like, I really don't like you, and that's why. You can just say, I have other plans, even if those plans are just Netflix or whatever. Like you can really choose to speak up for yourself, but please stop lying. Please stop saying things that are not true, because you don't think your own time and effort is valuable enough, is reason enough. So that's kind of what I would say is like, give yourself, like, this is not a light switch at all.
Right. It takes practice, like everything else, putting it into practice.
That's right. That's right.
So in closing, Amy, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Oh my gosh. Well, it would absolutely be my husband. Oh my gosh. That gets me emotional just thinking about it, because I would say, thank you for being everything that I needed before I ever even knew I needed it, and for believing in me and reminding me of my greatness when I could not see it with a goddamn flashlight. And for just not letting me throw in the towel. I'm sure you probably hear this a lot. Like, I can't tell you how many times, Elayne, I was like, let me just go work at Trader Joe's. Like, let me just,
Girl, I know.
Right? And he was like, what are you even talking about? So really somebody who would not let me sell myself short ever. And that is invaluable. I mean, it truly is. I'm incredibly grateful to him.
Excellent. Beautiful. Now
Oh.
tell us how we can be amazing for you. As you said, how can we support you? Tell everyone, I'll have a link. We'll get the link for that podcast, but tell everyone your website, any social media, what you want us to go to so we can support you.
Sure. Well, basically everything that I'm up to, you can find over at thejoyjunkie.com, and junkie is Junkie. And there's two major pieces where you can kind of get to know me a little bit better and understand my message. I have the free ebook that I was talking about, that we were talking about, that has different challenges that are specifically designed to get you into action around some of this stuff. Like, what are those baby steps? How do I start biting this off a little bit? So I'd love for you guys to grab that completely free. And depending on when this airs, it may be the ebook that's available, or it might be a free training that's available. Either way, I can help you start to flex that muscle a little bit more. And pretty much everywhere on social media, I'm at The Joy Junkie. I hang out the most on Instagram, and have a weekly podcast too. So I'd love for you to come hang out and listen.
Excellent. And we can find your podcast on thejoyjunkie.com too.
That's correct.
Excellent. Yeah. Amy, thank you so much. Thank you for my coaching session. I always tell everybody, having a podcast for me is just the best. I mean, I've been enriched by over 300 women. So I know, this was gold right here. So thank you so much. And I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of the women listening, and a few good men. I always like to shout out our men who listen.
Hell yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. What a blessing.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Amy. Maybe that message came for you right on time, like I find it always does for me. Messages come right on time. After I've had an experience, when I'm about to go into another experience, you hear what you need to hear at the right time. You just have to pay attention and be aware. So thank you, Amy, for sharing your gift with us, your message with us, your expertise with us, your techniques with us. Hopefully you all soaked that up. Now, to find out more about Amy, to get in touch with her, and to find out about the resources she mentioned in this episode, just go to supportissexypodcast.com, go to that search icon at the top, and type in Amy. Her show notes page will pop up with links, resources, and ways to get in touch with her. Supportissexypodcast.com and search Amy. Thank you so much for being here. It would not be the same without you. I truly, truly appreciate you. Now, until we chat again, always remember, support is sexy, and having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.